So, section 4.2, law of cosine. There are only two lessons really in this unit. We did the one law of sine last time we met. Today's law of cosine. That's it. That's all the new topics for the quiz that you guys have, I think, on Wednesday of next week. Okay? So what we'll do, we'll cover law of cosine tomorrow, and law of cosine today. You'll have triangles and word problems with law of cosine, and then when I see you again tomorrow, we're just going to throw together law of cosine and law of sines, and you have to figure out how to use which one. Okay? So I'm seeing way too many gluings in the laptops. So whenever I put their laptops away, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? And I need you focused up here. Okay? This is the law of cosine. Okay? So solving for a side, a squared is b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine a. B squared is a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine b. C squared. So anyway, let's don't get bogged down in that. We're going to talk about how to use it and how to apply it. Okay. Now, when can we use the law of sine? Remember that? When was it? When you know what? An angle and an opposite side. You have to know that to use law of sine. So these were the very specific conditions, but you don't need to memorize that. If you just know that you have to know an angle and the opposite side. If you know that, if you can look at a drawing and you can identify that you know an angle and the opposite side, use the law of sines, okay? These are the three different conditions in a triangle that would give you that, but you don't need to memorize that. If you can look at, like we said here, I know this angle and I know the opposite side, that means use law of sines, okay? Law of cosine is a little bit different. If I know side, angle, side, or side, 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 I can use the law of cosine. So there are two conditions for the law of cosine. This is when you know two sides and the angle in between, or when you know three sides. Okay? These are two conditions under which you will use the law of cosine. If you know two sides and the angle in between, or if you know three sides. What do I mean by two sides and the angle in between? So if I have a triangle like this, okay? When I look at this, I know two sides and the angle in between, okay? Do you see why can't I use the law of sines here? I don't know an angle on the opposite side, but I know two sides and the angle in between. So that's what it means to say side, angle, side, okay? So these are the conditions. You don't have to memorize the angle, angle, side, all of that. You just need to know. If you can identify an angle and an opposite side, you'll use the law of sines. If you can identify two sides and the angle in between, that's law of cosine. Or if you can identify that you know three sides and none of the angles, that's law of cosines. Okay? So you will have the formula on the test, but with law of cosine, what's really important is just to know how to apply it. Okay? So let's just say, for example, I'm going to come over here and circle side A. If I want to use the law of cosine to solve for side A, you've got the formula up there. But the way I just try to memorize this formula, you could be solving for C or B, so the formula gets sort of complicated, but this is the way I remember it. So if I'm solving for side A, I know that A squared is equal to, so if I'm solving for this, it's going to be B squared plus C squared minus 2 times BC. So if I'm solving for A squared, A squared is B squared plus C squared minus 2BC and the cosine of the angle in between them. What angle is in between B and C? A. So it's just cosine A. Okay. That's how I solve for A squared. Now suppose I wanted to solve for B. All this means is B squared is equal to, let's add the square of the other two sides, A squared plus C squared minus 2AC and the cosine of the angle in between. What's the angle in between A and C? Okay. So in working with this formula, that's just the way I remember it, that solving for any side, that side squared is equal to the square of the other two sides added minus 2 times the product of those sides and the cosine of the angle in between. So the formula will be there, but you just have to know, based on what you're solving, how to apply that particular formula. Let's draw a triangle DEF. Okay, so you can draw, doesn't matter where you put these. What matters is once you've labeled the angles, where the sides are. So let's make this E look a little bit better. So what is this side right here? This is E. What is this side? F. And this one, D. Let's solve using the law of cosine for side F. Okay? If I'm solving for F, okay, according to the law of cosine, F squared is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. What are those? So it's E squared plus D squared, okay, minus 2, and then you multiply E and D together, and then the cosine of the angle in between. The cosine of the angle in between E and D is what angle? F. So like I said, the formula is going to be on your test, but you need to know that this is how, this allows me to solve for side F using this formula. Okay? Let's draw another example. Let's have triangle KLM. So KLM. What is this side right here? This is L, and then this is lowercase k, and this is M. Okay, let's solve for side K. K squared equal. What is K squared going to be equal to? Yeah, so M squared plus L squared. And then what? Minus 2 ML, and the cosine of what? Cosine of K. Capital K. Okay. So, with the law of cosine, if you're solving for any side, this, if I'm solving for here, this side squared is equal to this side squared plus this side squared minus 2, this times this, and the cosine of the angle in between. Okay? It doesn't quite flow like a song. Maybe you guys can work on that. Yes? No, it doesn't. You could write L and M, doesn't matter. Okay? So, let's get some practice working with the law of cosine. So, let's look at this particular triangle. Now, first of all, can I use the law of sines? No, because I only know one angle. I would need to know side R to use the law of sines, okay? So, but this fits the law of cosine because I know two sides and the angle in between, okay? So by this, I know side angle side, or two sides and the angle in between. That is set up to use the law of cosine. So what do I know? Angle R is what, 105? Side P is what? 16. I got very different answers on that. Side Q is what? 25. Okay? So, with the law of cosine is going to allow me to solve for this side right here, R. Okay? R squared is going to be 16 squared plus 25 squared minus 2, 16, 25, and the cosine of 105. That's how I'm going to solve for side R. So, R squared is equal to, using the law of cosine, it's this side squared plus 16 squared minus 2, 25, 16, and the cosine of what? 105. Okay? That's how I'm going to solve for side R. Now, In the dark ages, when I was a kid, I had to do some more arithmetic. What are we going to do to solve this? Calculator, in a hurry. Okay, so I'm just going to go on my calculator and figure this out. So it's 25 squared plus 16 squared minus 2 times 25 times 16 times cosine of 105. That is 1088.06. So 25 squared plus 16 squared minus 2, 25, 16 cosine of 105. So 1088.06. So r squared equal 1088.66. What am I really wanting to solve for here? R. So I need to do what? Square root. So r is going to be the square root of this. So I'll just go to my calculator. I'll hit the square root sign. Rather than type it in and make a mistake, I'm just going to recall that number right there and say, you hit this up on the little square thing. Okay. So I'll redo that again. So, and that keeps you from worrying about round off. So I just go to square root, hit this little up button here, and enter, and then enter it again. 32.99. Okay. So R is 32.99. Now here's the other big thing with the law of cosine. Now if we look at it, I know that this side is 32.99. Now, do I know an angle and an opposite side? Yes, but please don't use law of sine. Once you start law of cosine, never switch, okay? Once you start law of cosine, you need to stick with it. There are some reasons why that are more complex than what we're going to get into in this class, okay? So once you use the law of cosine, you need to stick with it, okay? If you initially can use the law of sine, that's fine, but never switch in the middle of the process, okay? So let's figure out, now I need to figure out what these angles are, angle P and angle Q. I'm going to use the law of cosine in order to do that, okay? Let's solve for angle P since I've got more space to work on that one. Once I get angle P, how do you think I will get angle Q? Subtract from 180, because once you know two of the angles, you're good to go. So if I need to figure out angle Q, okay, if I use the law of cosine, that means I'm going to say 25 squared equal what? Use the law of cosine. 25 squared will equal what? 16 squared plus 32 whatever squared minus 2, 16 times the 32, and the cosine of what angle? Q. Okay, that's going to allow me to solve for angle Q. So to solve for this, oh sorry, I'm going to be solving for P. Let me back up. To solve for angle P. To solve for angle P, go to the opposite side. So 16 squared is going to be this squared plus this squared minus 2, this, and the cosine of that angle in between. So let's solve for angle P. So to do that, I'm going to have 16 squared equal 25 squared plus 32.99 squared minus 2, 25, 32.99, and the cosine of the angle. What's the angle in between 25 and 32? Angle what? Shouldn't have been that hard. Angle P is in between the 25 and the 32. Now, what's the only thing I don't know here? P. That's what I'm solving for. I'm solving for the angle here instead of the side. How am I going to solve for that angle? You could do that, but on the test, I'm going to want to see you do the work to get through this, okay? So all I want to do is to get that by itself. So this is going to be what? 16 squared minus 25 squared minus 32.99 squared equal negative 2, 25, 32.99 cosine P. What did I do to get from that step to the next one? What did I do? I just moved those numbers to the other side, okay? That's not hard, okay? What am I going to do now to get this by itself? What can I do to get cosine of P by itself? This is not trig. This is algebra 1 at this point. What can I do to get cosine of P by itself? Divide by everything that's in front of it, that's multiplied by. So, 16 squared minus 25 squared minus 32.99 squared over negative 2 times 25 times 32.99 equal the cosine of P. So all I did was, here was my equation, move these two numbers over, divide by whatever is multiplied, and now this is where I go in my calculator. So I'll put all of this in my calculator. So 16 squared. Now here's where you want to be careful. This is a fraction. So if you look at it, I've got a fraction that I'm entering. So I want to make sure that I treat it like that. I'm going to put a parentheses. So I've got 16 squared minus 25 squared minus 32.99 squared. Okay? That's the top of the fraction, right? 16 squared minus 25 squared minus 32.99 squared. And then divide it by negative 2, 25, and 32.99. So divided by, and I'll put another parentheses, negative 2 times 25 times 32.99. And all of that is 0.883504. So cosine of P equals 0.883504. How do I solve that for angle P? Inverse cosine, okay? So P is going to be equal to the inverse cosine of that number. So I'll just go back to my calculator, trig function, inverse cosine. Instead of typing that number down, I'm just going to bring that number right here, and 27.9. If I round that up to the degrees, what's the nearest degree for that? 28 degrees, okay? So P is 28 degrees, okay? Now to the very easy part, how do I find Q? Yeah, so it's 180 minus 105 minus 28, and what is that? That is what? 75 minus, what is it? So it's, I'll just do it on the calculator to be sure. 180 minus 105 minus 28, was that it? Is 47. So 47 degrees, okay? Right, if you solve for Q first, then you would do, P would be the easy one, okay? So now get it, you guys can, there is a solve command on the calculator, but I want to see, I'm going to want to see this work, okay? So I'm not interested in the calculator solving. I know the calculator can solve this, okay? Once you got to this formula, to get from here to here, guys, that's algebra 1 stuff, okay? Isolating a variable, okay? So you just got to be very meticulous and don't mess up with signs and moving things around. Okay? Let's keep moving. So that's one case where when I looked at this triangle and I knew two sides and the angle in between, I have to use law of cosine. Okay? So you need to be able to look at that and say, law of cosine is the only way to solve this because I don't know opposite side, opposite angle. And then again, the caveat, once you start with law of cosine, never mix it up. Always stick with that cosine law. Now, if you look at this one, what use case is this? So I know side, side, side. I don't know any angles. This is the other use case for law of cosine, okay? With the law of cosine, you can have two sides and the angle in between, or you can have all three sides, okay? So, in this case, what is side A? 14. What is side B? 16. Side C would then be 22, okay? So, let's solve for side A, okay? So, if I'm going to solve for side A, okay, with the law of cosine, just go to wherever the opposite side is, and that's what I'm going to start with, okay? So 14 squared equal. How do I do that with the law of cosine? What's it going to be? Yeah, 22 squared plus 16 squared minus what? 2 times 22 times 16 times the cosine of A. Okay? So the formula, it looks ugly, but if you get the routine of it and get the rhythm, it should be fine. What am I going to solve this for? I need to solve this for A. So the next step is, let's bring over what I can to the left side of the equation. So 14 squared minus 22 squared minus 16 squared equal negative 2. 22, 16, cosine A. What I don't want to do is just use my calculator and get each of these numbers, and I don't want to do multiple steps. I want to get it to the very end, and I can put it in the calculator one time and be done with it, okay? What do I need to do now to get the cosine A by itself? Divide by everything that's in front of it. So this is 14 squared minus 22 squared minus 16 squared over negative 2, 22, 16 equal the cosine of A. Once I get to there, I'm going to my calculator. Okay? So 14 squared. Be careful with this since it's a fraction. I'm going to put the top of the fraction. So I start a parentheses. 14 squared minus, what was it, 22? 22 squared minus what? 16 squared. That's the top of my fraction. I'm going to divide it by. I'm going to put another parentheses. The bottom of my fraction is what? Negative 2 times 22 times 16. Is that right? Negative 2, 22, 16. That is good. And there we go. 0.772727. So the cosine of A equal, was it 77? And there we go. 0.772727. What you don't want to do, you don't want to round up and say that's 0.8, okay? You don't want to round up until the very end, okay? Now, to solve this for A, what do I have to do? Inverse cosine. So A is going to be the inverse cosine of that number. And I'll go back to my calculator. So trig function, inverse cosine. I will not type that number down. I will recall it right there. And there we go. 39.4 to the nearest degree. What number is that? 39 degrees. Okay. So we get A is 39 degrees. Okay. Now I got to go through the same little process to find angle B, because once I get two angles, it gets a whole lot easier. Okay. So if I'm solving for angle B, okay, to start out with the law of cosine, I will go to which side? Where's the opposite side? So it's going to be what? 16 squared equal what? 22 squared plus 14 squared minus 2. So it's going to be that same process. So to solve for angle B, it's 16 squared equal 22 squared plus 14 squared minus 2. 22, 14, cosine of what angle? B. Okay. Okay. So if I'm solve this I'm going to get 16 squared minus 22 squared minus 14 squared over negative 2, 22, 14 equal the cosine of b. Okay? And I'll put all of that in my calculator. Okay? So, parentheses, 16 squared minus, 22 squared minus, what was it, 14? 14 squared. And then in my parentheses, all of that is divided by a new parentheses, negative 2 times 22 times 14. And that is 0.688312. So 0.688312 equal the cosine of b. To solve that for b is what? What do I do? Inverse cosine. So b is the inverse cosine of this. So I'll go back to my calculator. Trig function, inverse cosine. Recall that number. And to the nearest degree, what is that? 47. So b is 47 degrees. And now the easy part. How do I find c? Yeah, c is going to be 180 minus 39 minus 47. And what is that? 34 degrees. What is it? 94. Okay. Okay, so guys, it takes a little time. The formula is a little bit more complicated. You just got to be careful, okay? And like I said, you'll have the formula at the top of the page on your quiz, but the formula doesn't help you really if you don't know how to apply it. You know, that's saying pick a side, and then that side squared is the sum of the other two minus 2 times their product and the cosine of the angle in between. Just sort of knowing how to construct that based on any triangle. So I think next we have to work on a few word problems, okay? So the B-2 stealth bomber has wings that are 105 feet. Okay, so what's 105 in this problem? Yeah, so that's a wing right there, and that is another wing, okay? So that's 105, that's 105. If the angle in between the wings is 109, where is that angle? That's the angle right there at the top. So this angle is 109 degrees, okay? And then what is the wingspan? The wingspan is what? The length between. So they're asking me to solve for that. Okay, that's what they want to know. Now, can I use the law of sine? No, because I don't know an angle on opposite side. But I do know, what are the two use cases for law of cosine? Yeah, two sides and the angle in between, or all three sides. Do I know this is which one? This is two sides and the angle in between. So I want to solve for this. So according to the law of cosine, x squared is going to equal what? Yeah, 105 squared plus 105 squared minus 2 times 105, 105, and the cosine of what? 109, okay? So rather than get, fancy and try to simplify that, I'm just going to put all that in the calculator and let it take care of it. So 105 squared plus 105 squared minus 2 times 105 times 105 times cosine 109 equal. Did I do that right? What did I do?
That's right. You're solving for x squared.
Oh yeah, sorry. Sometimes I think like, oh, that didn't work, and then you're right, it's x squared. 29228.8. So x squared equal 29. Sorry about that. 228.8. Yeah. So to solve for x, I'll just go back to my calculator and just say square root of that number right there is 170.96. Okay, so that tells me the wingspan is 170.96 what? Feet. Okay. Okay. So a common mistake that I made there when I got the number, remember that's x squared. You're solving for x. Okay. So pretty straightforward, right? I mean, it's not too difficult. Um, how many of you are directionally challenged? Okay, we got to work on that. You know where north, northwest, east, and south are, everybody? Okay.
No, it's
Never eat soggy waffles. Okay, that's it. Okay.
He said that he thought directionally challenged meant short.
Well, you are a vocabulary challenge today. So north, northwest, east, and south. So whatever. Never eat soggy waffles. Never eat soggy wheat. Whatever it is. I mean, that's just north, east, south, and west. Huh? Well, no. But in the course of when I draw a problem, I'm going to draw north this way. Okay. So I mean, I don't have to. You're not going to need to look out in the sky and tell me something like that. But in the context of this problem, most times on a piece of paper, we're going to draw north up top, south on the bottom, east and west. Okay. So from Atlanta, you can drive due west or you can fly to Birmingham. So if this is Atlanta, where is due west? Which way is that? This way, okay? So it means I can go from Atlanta to Birmingham. Okay? And I know how far is that? 140 miles. Okay? You can also fly to Charlotte, which is 30 degrees north of east. Okay? Which way is east? Okay? Which way is north? Where do you think 30 degrees north of east would be? 30 degrees up. So that means here is Charlotte. Okay? Okay? That's what this means. Okay? I was in Atlanta. I could go due west and get to Birmingham. Or I could go 30 degrees north of east. Remember, this is east right here. That's west, okay? 30 degrees north of east gets me into Charlotte, okay? Okay. And what do they want me to figure out? So how far is it to Charlotte is what? That's 226, okay? What is it they want me to figure out? How far is Charlotte to Birmingham? So they want me to figure out what is this distance right here, okay? So in order, pardon me?
Is this drawing wrong? I tried to do it
Let's see. Well, you've got Birmingham east instead of west. Pardon me? Or what? It's possible. Come on, guys. East and west. East and west, guys, is not that hard. Okay.
Could you just give us the drawings on the
Some will, some won't. Okay. So yeah. So okay, guys. I'm not taking complaints right now. We're working through this problem. So in order to use the law of cosine, I would have to know I've got two sides. I don't know all three sides. I would need two sides, and which angle would I need? The angle what? When can I use law of cosine? Right, two sides and the angle in between. How do I figure out what this angle is? Not that hard. Yeah, it's 150 is this angle right here. Because if you look at it, that flat line is 180 degrees. This whole angle is 180. So if I only go up 30 degrees, this side has to be 150, okay? Basic geometry at this point. Now, what am I solving for? This side right here? According to the law of cosine, this side squared is going to be equal to what? Yeah, 140 squared plus 226 squared minus 2, 140, 226, and the cosine of what? 150. This angle is 150 because 150 and 30 is 180, okay? These are supplementary angles, okay? So, calculator time. So it's 140 squared plus, what was it, 226 squared minus 2 times 140 times 226 times cosine of, what was it, 150? 125478. So to solve for x, I need what? Square root of that. So I would just go to my square root key uh, and recall that number right there. 354.2. So 354.2 what? Miles. That's the distance from Charlotte to Birmingham. Okay? So in each of these problems, the key is the drawing. Okay? You got to get the drawing, and then you're solving a triangle. And one more, and then we're done. So now you don't have to. You do not have to have been to Manhattan to figure this out. Okay? Because it doesn't matter if I draw it upside down or sideways or what. So the Flatiron Building in New York is this famous building that's shaped like a what? Triangle. Okay. We have one in Atlanta as well. Okay. So and you should have known based on this word problem, everything is shaped as a triangle. Okay. So I've got this Flatiron Building, and it's on a triangular lot. Okay. Something like this. Okay. And it's bounded by 3 streets. So let's just say the first street is Fifth Avenue. So I'm going to call this Fifth Avenue. Okay. The other street is Broadway. And the other street is 22nd Street. These 3 streets bound the lot where that is. Okay. And then what do I know? The building is approximately 180 feet on Fifth Avenue. So that's 180. And on Broadway, it's 195 feet. And on 22nd Street, it is 75 feet. Okay. What is the angle at 5th and Broadway? So which angle do they want me to solve for? This one right here. So I'm going to say that's the angle they want to know. Okay. So does this fit law of cosine? Yes. Side, side, side is one of the cases for law of cosine. So if I'm solving for this angle, I just say, okay, if I'm solving for that angle, go straight to that side, and that's where I start my law of cosine. Now, in law of sine, you knew an angle on opposite side. In law of cosine, you are solving for one of those, okay? So to the law of cosine is going to be what? 75 squared equal what? Yeah, 180 squared. Yeah. Plus 195 squared minus 2. 180. 195. And the cosine of whatever that angle is. So here I'm solving for the angle. So I'm going to have 75 squared minus 180 squared minus 195 squared equal negative 2, 180, 195 cosine theta. I'm doing more writing than anything here. Okay, there's not a lot of thought going on at this process. I want to isolate cosine of theta. So this is 75 squared minus 180 squared minus 195 squared, all of that over negative 2, 180, 195. That is the cosine of the angle. So I will go to my calculator. So, and here's where I always do parentheses because I've got a fraction, complex fraction. 75 squared. And what was it? 180 and 195 minus 180 squared minus 195 squared. In my parentheses, all of that is divided by a new set of parentheses. Negative 2 times 180 times 195, and that is 12/13. Okay. So I've got, you could have gotten a decimal, but that's okay. Cosine of theta equals 12/13. How do I solve for the angle? Yeah, so this angle is the inverse cosine of 12/13. Okay. So I'll go back to my calculator. Inverse cosine. Recall that number right there. And I get, let me get the approximate. Is 22.6. What is the closest degree for that? 23 degrees. Okay. So this is 23 degrees. Okay. That is the angle. Okay. Okay. So again, the formula, you got to read, the formula is a little bit more complicated than law of sine. Okay. You agree with that? Yes. Okay. But guys, I mean, you look at it, the law of sine is only used when you know an angle opposite side. Law of cosine will be used when you know two sides and the angle in between, or all three sides. And you just got to know for any triangle, you can construct the law of cosine three ways. So in this case, if I wanted to solve for this side, 180 squared would be 195 squared plus 75 squared minus 2. This times this, cosine of the angle in between. Okay?